Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're unpacking a massive, absolutely crucial document that essentially acts as the ultimate gatekeeper for development and industrialization in India. We're talking about the Environment Impact Assessment, or EIA, Notification 2006. If you ever found yourself wondering how a colossal coal mine, a brand new national highway, or even a sprawling urban township actually gets the green light to break ground, well, it all comes down to this exact regulatory matrix. Today, we're zooming in specifically on how this framework categorizes projects. We're going to explore exactly how India draws the line between a project that demands the attention of the central government versus one that can be safely handled by state authorities. So here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with India's EIA framework basics, then move into the criteria and general conditions. After that, we'll tackle project schedules 1 to 4 and wrap it all up with project schedules 5 to 8. All right, part 1, India's EIA framework basics. So, the crucial point here is that to avoid a totally impossible bureaucratic bottleneck at the federal level, major projects get bucketed into two distinct categories. Category A projects, those require prior clearance straight from the central government, specifically the Ministry of Environment, Forest, and Climate Change, working on the recommendations of a central expert appraisal committee. Category B projects, on the other hand, are handled a lot closer to home. They go to the state or union territory level, handled by the SEIAA, that's the State Environment Impact Assessment Authority. So it's essentially a federal versus state jurisdiction thing. Now, there is a really specific, kind of fascinating exception to this two-tier system. For minor mineral mining, where the lease area is under 5 hectares, the project becomes what's called Category B2. These smaller scale extractions actually get pushed down to the lowest tier of governance, the district level. The DEIA handles these, which makes sense, right? You want to ensure that local, surface level digging doesn't just completely clog up the state authorities' desks. Moving right along to Section 2, criteria and general conditions. Okay, so how do regulators actually decide if a project is a massive central issue or a manageable state issue? Well, categorization relies heavily on the spatial extent of the potential impacts, basically just how wide of an area is going to be affected. But it also weighs potential harm to human health, impacts on natural resources, and even man-made structures. Think about it. A massive coal plant obviously carries a way heavier pollution load than, say, a small cement mixer. So these broad indicators are what dictate the specific, hard, quantitative thresholds we're going to look at in just a minute. But wait, there is a vital plot twist in this policy, and it's called the general condition. A project might technically fall under Category B based on its size or its output, right? But geographic context can change the whole shebang. The general condition is basically a rule that strips a state of its jurisdiction entirely and elevates the project straight to the central level, making it a Category A project by default. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the magic number, 5 kilometers. If a smaller Category B project is located within 5 kilometers of a highly sensitive area, we're talking national parks notified under the Wildlife Protection Act, critically polluted zones, or even interstate boundaries, boom, the general condition kicks in. The actual environmental load of the project might be relatively small on paper, but because of that delicate location, it absolutely demands central government oversight. All right. Let's get into the nitty-gritty. Section 3, Project Schedules 1 to 4. And this brilliantly illustrates how Schedule 1 translates those broad criteria into rigid, concrete numbers for mining and power generation. For instance, a coal mine over 500 hectares, that's a federal Category A issue, but 500 and below, that goes to the state. For hydropower, the dividing line is exactly 100 megawatts. Thermal power plants running on coal or gas jump up to Category A the second they hit 500 megawatts. It's a strictly mathematical threshold that determines exactly who holds the power of approval. Literally, 1 single megawatt can completely change which level of government you have to deal with. Moving down the supply chain, Schedule 2 covers primary processing. Look at coal washeries. The dividing line there is a throughput of 2.5 million tons per annum. But notice mineral beneficiation. That's the process of separating the valuable minerals from the unusable rock. The notification actually categorizes all standalone beneficiation projects as Category B, meaning they generally fall entirely to the state level, regardless of how big they are. Then we have Schedule 3, which looks at materials production. Here, we really start to see the perceived environmental load of certain industries reflected in the rules. Primary metallurgical industries, both ferrous and non-ferrous, are universally deemed Category A. There is absolutely no Category B for them. They always go straight to the center. Sponge iron, however, gets divided at 200 tons per day, and cement plants use a threshold of 1.0 million tons per annum. Schedule 4 governs further materials processing. Petroleum refining, much like the primary metallurgy we just talked about, is deemed so impactful that all projects are strictly Category A. But look closely at the chlor-alkali industry. This is fascinating. If a plant produces 300 tons per day outside of an industrial estate, it's Category A. However, if that exact same project is located inside a notified industrial estate, it drops right down to Category B. The zoning actually mitigates the regulatory burden. Location, 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 right? Let's move on and see how this builds in our final section. Section 4, Project Schedules 5 to 8. Schedule 5 is massive, covering manufacturing and fabrication. Chemical fertilizers, they are nearly all Category A, with only one very specific exception for certain single superphosphates that drops down to Category B. Molasses distilleries are divided at the 100 kiloliters per day mark. And, once again, with the synthetic organic chemicals industry, we see zoning play a huge role. Projects located outside notified industrial estates face central Category A appraisal, while those safely tucked inside an estate drop to Category B. Schedule 6 is brief but absolutely critical, dealing with service sectors. The primary focus here is the transportation of hazardous materials. Oil and gas pipelines that pass through national parks, sanctuaries, coral reefs, or other ecologically sensitive areas are strictly Category A. The federal oversight here is completely non-negotiable just due to how incredibly delicate those habitats are. Now, Schedule 7 outlines physical infrastructure, and honestly, the logic here is quite intuitive. All new commercial airports are central Category A, while expansions fall to the state as Category B. Ports and harbors are divided at a handling capacity of 5 million tons per annum. And for roads, new national highways require central clearance, whereas new state highways are appraised at the state level. It makes perfect sense. Finally, we reach Schedule 8, dealing with urban development. Now, this schedule is entirely unique because these projects, like building and construction and townships and area development, are exclusively appraised as Category B. There is no Category A for these items. The classification relies completely on the square meterage of the built-up area and the total hectare area. This essentially keeps local urban development firmly in the hands of state-level authorities. But there is a massive regulatory exception you need to be aware of here. Remember the general conditions we talked about earlier? That 5-kilometer rule that can instantly upgrade a project to Category A? Well, the notification explicitly states that general conditions do not apply to Schedule 8. This means that even if a massive area development project or a sprawling township is located right next door to a national park, that proximity alone will not shift its jurisdiction to the central government. It stays Category B. And that, my friends, brings us to the big picture. We've navigated some incredibly dense metrics today, right? From mining hectares and power grid megawatts, all the way down to the square meterage of urban townships. It's a highly complex taxonomy, designed to manage massive bureaucratic loads while simultaneously protecting sensitive geographies. So I want to leave you with this final thought. How successfully does this rigid, threshold-based system actually balance the undeniable demand for rapid economic growth with the absolute necessity of strict environmental oversight? It's a tough balancing act for sure. Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and I hope this deep dive got some much-needed clarity to India's EIA framework.